Let's say that we want to graph the piecewise function of h of x. This piecewise function is made out of three little sections. The section displayed in the first line, the section displayed in the second line, and the section displayed in the third line. Let's concentrate on the first line. Notice that the first line, we use a comma to separate the first and the second section. The first section, it is going to tell us what function we should consider, which in this case, we want to consider the function y equals -2 raised to the x. And the second section is going to tell us what are the x values that we are allowed to use, which in this case are the x values which are less than -4. If we were to place the equation -2 raised to the x in the graphing calculator, we would have got the following graph. So now we know how the graph should look like. Now let's only concentrate on those x values which are less than -4, which is this section in yellow, which seems to be a flat line very close to the y value of 0. So let's copy that section in the piecewise function that we are creating on the right-hand side. So there we have it. Now the last thing to check is what is going on exactly at the value of -4. Notice that the inequality, it does not have an equal sign underneath it. Therefore, we're going to have an open circle at -4. So we're done with the first line. Now let's concentrate on the second line. In our second line, here we have our comma. The left-hand side of that comma is going to tell us what is the function that we will consider, which in this case, it will be the function y equals negative absolute value of x. And the right-hand side of that comma is going to tell us the x values that we are going to use, which in this case are those x values between -4 and 0. If we were to graph this function in any graphing calculator, we will obtain the following shape. Now let's identify the restriction on x's. Let's only look at those values of x's that are between -4 and 0, which is in here. So we're only going to consider this green section of the red line. Let's copy that section in the piecewise function that we are creating. Now let's concentrate on the endpoints. Notice that at -4, the inequality, it does have an equal sign underneath it. Therefore, at -4, we will have a closed circle. And in the inequality, on the right-hand side, notice that the inequality, it has an equal sign underneath the inequality. So we will have a closed circle at 0. Now let's concentrate on the last section, which is the third line. So here we have our comma. On the left-hand side, we're going to find the equation that we will consider. So we're going to consider the equation y equals 4 minus x squared. And on the right-hand side, we're going to find the x values that we would like to use, which in this case are those x values which are greater than 0. So let's take a look at the graph of the function 4 minus x squared, which is a parabola facing down and shift 4 units up. But we don't want to just copy the whole graph in the piecewise function that we're trying to create on the right. We only want those x values which are greater than 0, which is this section in our graph. So in our piecewise function, we're only going to copy this section displayed in purple. So let's do that. Now, the last thing that we should do, we should look at the end behavior. Notice that underneath the inequality, there is no equal sign. Therefore, at 0, we will have an open circle. So we are done because this piecewise function of h of x, it is displayed in the graph on the right, which is made out of 3 sections. Our first line, our second line, and our third line. Hello. If you would like to continue learning about mathematics, you can check out the videos on the left.